let's move on to the second semifinal game on Friday between Ohio State and Texas. I believe they've only played three times
Yep.
in the past, the last being in 2009. This game will be played Friday, January 10th, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN. And it's the Cotton Bowl Classic. I always want to say it's at the Cotton Bowl, but it's now in Arlington. A little bit of a home field advantage location wise for Texas. I gave them a half point.
Especially if everybody from Columbus can't fly in.
Yeah, that's true as well. Uh, I gave them a half point. You could argue it's not worth anything, but so to me, oh, I should say, as of right now, Ohio State's sitting as a 6 point favorite. Total is 53 and a half. I believe that's been holding steady. So to me, this game is very difficult because this is basically just comes down to a market question. You know, I said Ohio State's going to win the title after what I saw against Tennessee. I said I know it was narrative-y, but I think that they're going to take that Michigan loss and it's going to fuel them to the national title. And then they've looked unbelievably dominant the past two games. But during the regular season, it was not that way. You know, they almost lost. They arguably should have lost to Nebraska at home. They lose to Michigan at home. It wasn't pretty all year. Did they just turn it on and this is the team that we can expect? Because in a way, yeah, they just looked apart. And I mean, I'm assuming they're going to take a ton of money. Most of the bets are going to be on them. But, and part of me says that they're the best team in the country by far.
Hmm.
The talent was always there. But also the other part of my brain says, I mean, just from a buy low, sell high perspective, I mean, is this just the highest, the peak that Ohio State's ever going to be? And
Your conundrum is 2019 Joe Burrow LSU
yeah, but they at least looked good
all season. Yeah.
all season. This makes it even more difficult. And because Ohio State hasn't, but yeah, I mean, it's just if they're going to look like that, maybe the market hasn't caught up enough. So I was all set to bet Ohio State, but after bumping Ohio State a lot the past 2 weeks because they looked so dominant and downgrading Texas, I was only at around four. So at six, I show value on Texas. And but here's the thing. So numbers wise, I came in wanting to bet Ohio State, but I can't at six. Numbers wise, I should bet Texas. But here's the thing, Ohio State, not only have they looked great the past 2 weeks, Texas has not looked great. And I'm a bit worried that their defense might be overrated because coming into the College Football Playoff, I had them it's a top five defense right there with Ohio State. But if you look during the regular season, they lost to Georgia twice, including the SEC championship. Here are the teams they beat: Colorado State, Michigan, UTSA, UL Monroe, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M. There's not a top 25 offense. Maybe you could argue Texas A&M. They're right on the fringe. They faced Florida with like their third string quarterback. They faced UL Monroe when General Booty was still the quarterback.
They didn't
They're
cover
not,
against Taylor Green in Arkansas.
yeah, I mean, but just from an that was probably one of their most impressive defensive performances.
Yep. Yep.
That game, uh, the Texas A&M game, they shut down Texas A&M, but I think ultimately the Texas A&M offense was overrated because they got a bump from like two games where they surprised other teams with a quarterback. But then you go into the college football playoff. Clemson is arguably maybe a top 20 offense. I have them between 20 and 25. Clemson moved the ball at will on them. And Kate Klubnik was throwing all over them.
Hmm.
And then Arizona State, without their top receiver, was able to move the ball. Sam Levitt, he wasn't really efficient throwing the ball, but Cam Scadaboo ran for 143, had 100 yards receiving. It wasn't the prettiest offensive output. It looks a lot better because they went to overtime and they scored 31, but they moved the ball better than I thought as that game progressed, and they were able to come back and they scored 16 points in the fourth quarter. So is the Texas defense overrated? And then I have questions about the offense in that, number one, why couldn't they run the ball against Arizona State? That's extremely troubling because everything for that Texas offense stems off of the run game. I mean, Wisner and Blue had 22 carries for 49 yards. Like, what? Against Arizona State's undersized defensive line.
Right.
Is Ewers healthy? Like, is he still dealing with stuff? Like, his ankle is oblique. I also think he has just deficiencies in general. Are their tackles fully healthy? Isaiah Bond, is he fully healthy? And if they can't run the ball, are they going to be able to have Ewers consistently drop back and throw against this Ohio State defense? I have my doubts. So, and then the other side, I do like the Texas secondary. And then you have the Jim Thorpe Award winner, Jahdae Barron, going up against Jeremiah Smith, who I would take number one in the draft this year, and he's not even eligible till 2027.
Hmm.
But Barron's at a significant size disadvantage. Like, are you able to just put him one-on-one on Smith? I don't know. So I'm so conflicted on this game. Curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, that Jeremiah Smith thing versus Barron is more like college basketball when the big guy comes down at the rebound, you're trying to pop it out of his hands.
Because
Let's
Jeremiah
start.
Smith is like, I mean, he is unbelievable. Like DK Metcalf, Julio Jones vibes.
Which side of the ball do you want to start on first?
So let's start with the Texas defense. Is
Yeah.
this defense overrated?
Well, first off, I'll
Because
say that there's an ACC crew here, so I've already
get
done my.
ready.
Yeah, get ready. Listen, is it justified? I think we should start with power ratings that people respect. If you respect mine, I'm at 3. If you respect Sagarin, they're at 3.2, and if you respect SP Plus and Bill Conley, you're at 4.8. Nobody's at 6. That doesn't mean that Ohio State can't cover. It just means that's the reason you're hearing a lot of conflicted bettors like myself and Stuckey. They're like, what are we looking at here? The Ohio State offense and defense is real. And we talked about the Rose Bowl at
I know
length.
one, but for what it's worth, I know one person I really respect that is at right around 6. But
Are they
it just
higher or
comes
lower?
down to like
Are they
how
higher or
much
lower?
right at six. I right at
Right
6.
at 6. Okay.
It's It's just it comes down to how much do you upgrade. Texas also, I think, gets down like how much do you downgrade Texas
Right.
for the past two games,
And you listen
and
to
then how
Sark.
much do you upgrade Ohio State for like separating just these two data points? It's very difficult to do versus their whole season because the potential was always there. They didn't really live up to it, but now like were they holding things back? They've unleashed the offense. The talent is there, and like just that aggressiveness in how you adjust Ohio State
Yeah.
uh, is not an easy thing to do this late in the season.
And you listen to Sark, his words. We had a bad game against Clemson, against Arizona State. His words. They executed what Kenny called. They executed. So his words, right? So when are we going to get the Texas team that we've seen all season, who's only taken losses to Georgia, right, and no one else? Let's start on the Ohio State offensive side of the ball. So the whole dynamic has changed because Chip Kelly has stepped out of his running grit mode and wants aggressive downfield passing. Will Howard over the last 2 games has been perfect. 5 big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. It's interesting to note that the Rose Bowl, there were only 3 wide receivers that caught passes. The 2 of them, Emeka Egbuka out of the slot, Jeremiah Smith at the wideout position. There's nothing wrong with this running game. There's no reason why they decided to go pass instead of run. Quinshon Judkins, Trevion Henderson,
But the
dangerous.
pass opens up the run even more.
Right.
Um, and then, by the way, this offensive line seems to be coming together as well.
Yep. And Chip Kelly is still running inside zone, outside zone. He can run any run concept he wants. They had 179 yards. The Texas defense, Pete Kwiatkowski's 3.35 has just been destroyed over the middle. It was the reason you and I spent 30 minutes just haggling over Clemson, Texas, and the point spread, and I wanted 14. Is like I knew Texas was going to get attacked over the middle with tight end Jake Brenningstool and slot Antonio Williams. Texas just couldn't stop that. Arizona State, the reason I took that number, I knew they were going to go over the middle with Cam Scadaboo and Melquan Stovall. They had 19 targets over the middle. So the numbers for the Sun Devils, though, I think where I can start to make a case for Texas, because this is how you have to handicap this game. Is there an avenue for the Longhorns to cover? Not win the game, can they cover? And here's where we start. The Sun Devils went over the middle too. 19 targets to those two names that I mentioned, but they didn't get a lot of yards after catch. And they didn't produce a lot. The one person that is consistently having problems, that has not cleaned up their coverage grades, is outside linebacker Anthony Hill Jr. He That is the piece that everyone's going to go after. I expect Trevion Henderson to attack the middle directly. He averaged 1.8 receptions per game over the season, but he's had 9 targets in the last 2 games. Henderson is going at Anthony Hill of the Texas defense. His season average is 14.7 yards receiving, but he's gone 19 yards or more receiving in 6 of the last 7 games. I took Trevion Henderson over receiving yards in the app. I love that for that perspective, because I think the safeties and the corners, everybody else cleaned up their grades. Jalen Gilbo, Malik Muhammad, they both came to respectable season-long coverage grades. Anytime TD on Emeka Egbuka probably at play, depends on the price, because he will line up in the slot and go over the middle too, and sometimes get matched up on a linebacker that he can take advantage of. The problem is he's had 10 TDs on the season. He only had 2 in the last 5 games. Either he's due or he's just not a part of the package in the red zone. So the only prop that I like for Ohio State on the offensive side is Henderson receiving yards, because he's going straight at that linebacker in the middle. The Jeremiah Smith thing is interesting. I would actually let that number float on his yards and maybe take the under. I think Barron is going to find a way to get enough stops for him on the outside. He's just been a savior at the corner position. He was playing nickel. They moved him to the outside, 5 interceptions, 9 PBUs. There's a reason he won the Jim Thorpe. That is a great matchup that on the all 22 is going to be fascinating. From a rushing perspective, Texas, the defense just struggles with inside zone. And this is where I'm like, is Chip going to go back to running the ball all the time? Texas defense cannot defend inside zone. I expect Henderson and Judkins to feast on the inside. And the Texas defense is 75th in missed tackles allowed. So I don't see a lot of resistance, but I've seen.
They're going to put Smith in the slot at times too, which is also just a cheat code, which is scary.
That's bad. If you can live bet a Smith TD, if you see him line up in the slot, that'd be something. But I think overall, I've seen everybody clean up their coverage grades, clean up their yards after catch, except for linebacker Anthony Hill Jr. So I'd see more hurdles than what Oregon threw up. I see more hurdles than what Clemson threw up. More hurdles than what Tennessee threw up from a defensive perspective. I do think Texas can try to keep this within the number. It's the other side.
The Texas secondary is significantly more talented than the Tennessee secondary.
Yeah. I think it's the other side of the ball that put me on Texas +6, which I am invested. I think the number's too high, and I think there are reasons. So, on the other side of the ball, red zones and finishing drives have not been a problem. The Peach Bowl saw 3.9 average yard for finishing drives. If you look at the 2 playoff games for Sarkisian's offense, 8 trips to the red zone, 4 touchdowns, 2 field goals. He would take that any day. That's above season average numbers for what he does in the red zone. We mentioned that Arizona State and Quinn Ewers last week. What was my big prop? Him to go over his passing yards. I think it was 260, somewhere around there. Well, the handicap was that he dominates cover 1. Well, he ended up with 322. And the heaviest package used by Jim Knowles and his nickel defense is cover 1. And we talked at length in last week's podcast about the movement of Jordan Hancock back to single high safety to allow Caleb Downs to roam. The reason Ohio State is good. Yeah, and the reason Ohio State has been so elite on defense is because no one's getting past these guys on the ground. Like, they're not giving up explosives. They are elite tacklers. But let's talk about coverage for just a second here. Jordan Hancock is not the greatest coverage single high safety. If you go and look at his receiving grades, he's going to be matched up one-on-one against Matthew Golden in a couple of downfield shots. Now, remember, I'm going to get to a point that really made up my mind on this game, but Matthew Golden has been on fire. 10 targets against Arizona State for 149 yards. He's had 309 receiving yards in the last 2 playoff games. He gets one-on-one with Jordan Hancock. He can take one to the house. So I would like Matthew Golden's yards on the over for a prop, but he's only had 1 TD in the last 5 games. I'd stay away from anytime TDs. As far as I have no expectations Texas can run here. We mentioned it, Wisner, Blue. The stat that I tweeted out
And
after I
Ohio State's run D the last couple weeks. I mean, granted, there were some, they were in favorable game states, and both Oregon and Tennessee had running back injuries,
right.
which is worth noting. But man, they were stout up front and weren't allowing just any holes or any opportunities for backs. I'm just so concerned that everything flows from the Texas running. They
Right.
couldn't run it against Arizona State. That's
But
very
and
troublesome to me because I don't know if I trust Ewers to just drop back without play action, without the screens, and consistently move the ball to keep up with Ohio State.
I think there's two things going on. The one tweet that I put out where Oregon was stuffed on 18 of 20 carries. Listen, the national stuff rate is 30%. You stuffed 18 of 20 carries. That's absolutely insane. And Knowles, his defense dominates outside zone. I don't expect Texas to run the ball at all. So I go back to Hancock, who was actually in the game plan against Oregon. Oregon targeted him 7 times, the highest he's been targeted all season. They caught 5 against him, and he gave up 24 yards after catch. That is the avenue for Texas in the passing game. Then let's go to Ewers and blitz. I think I've finally figured out why Sark has stuck by Ewers the entire year. These numbers, for some reason, I concentrate more on pressure in my handicap than I do the blitz, right? It's two different things. You can create pressure with 3, you can create pressure with 4. But what happens when you're sending extra guys on stunts? These numbers are crazy. Like, not only do Ewers kill cover 1, but he's 20%, 8% of Ewers' dropbacks have had blitz. He's produced a moderate success rate of 50%. His EPA is through the roof. When Ewers has seen blitz, 12 TDs to 4 INTs, a 22.4% big play rate. And if you want to go even farther, when he sees 5 or more, Ewers has 15 big time throws to 3 turnover worthy plays. The place to attack Ohio State is Sonny Styles and Cody Simon, the linebackers. If Ewers sees a stunt in cover 1, he's going to eat Ohio State's defense up. Sonny Styles, Cody Simon, the linebackers of Ohio State, gave up 15 catches on 16 targets in their last game for 146 yards and 77 yards after the catch. I want a Gunnar Helm, the tight end, the one who's catching all the touchdown in both playoff games. I want a Gunnar Helm anytime TD for Texas. Ewers is elite against cover 1. Ewers is beyond explosive when it comes to identifying blitz when teams send 5 or more. So, is there an avenue for Texas? That's the handicap, everybody. Is there an avenue to cover the points? My answer is yes. Ohio State by 5, 4, 3, fine. At 6, there's an avenue for Texas.
Yeah, I like Helm targeting Helm props. I might have some Helm props. I also, because of Barron's size disadvantage, I might go like put Barron on Igbuka and then Bill Belichick this, and then have a have help on Smith. Just I don't know. I'm curious to see how they end up playing that.
Any possibility that Sark and Kwiatkowski is kind of base defensing this until this point?
It's possible. I mean, here's the thing. Other thing that I'll put Texas for an
Are we
agree. We're
agreeing at 6?
34-24. I'm going to put Texas on the board, the agree tab.
Okay. All right. As I feel after
I mean, my numbers show value in it,
after
and
the Twitter tirade, I felt like I was on an island with this Texas thing. I've felt all week like I'm on an island with this Texas thing. But I did my due diligence. I did my X's and O's. I did everything.
my numbers show value in it, but I'm just afraid that I'm not aggressively like and I do have my concerns about Texas, so it's not like my favorite bet ever,
Right.
but I
Yeah.
do show value in it. I will say also psychologically, one of the reasons I like Ohio State to win the national title, and again, it's narrative, is that they were embarrassed. They were written off after that Michigan game, right? And then you saw them against Tennessee. Everyone already written them off. They came in that game hair on fire, dominated from the opening snap. Then they're underdogs. I mean, excuse me, like they're playing a team, they're small favorites. They're playing a team that already beat them in Oregon, undefeated. Now they win those 2 games. Everyone in the world is crowning them national title champions. Go listen to anyone talk about college football right now. Ohio
Yeah.
State's winning it all, right?
Yeah.
do they do they come out with that same fire that was fueling them from a just a human perspective? Or do we see like a flat? I know it's a playoff game, but just like, do they have that? Because we've seen them be flat. How are they not up for Michigan? Now, some of it was play calling, um, but the Nebraska game. So, like, that psychological edge, does that now go to Texas? Like, Texas comes in as the underdog. Uh, just something
Did
worth
you
noting that I
did you put in
thought
your
about.
hand did you put in your handicap that Bevo, Matthew McConaughey, and the Undertaker will all be on the sidelines for Texas? I'm
Yeah,
just kidding. There is room for Bevo in AT&T Stadium. There wasn't in the Peach Bowl.
which would be nice. But yeah, so maybe we'll be the only ones on Texas Island. Hook
Yep,
'em. But it's not the most confident I've ever been in a bet.
agree.
I'll tell you that. Oh, do you have a same game parlay for this?
Yeah, I mean, just to summarize everything, I would Texas +6, Travion Henderson. I took it 19 and a half in the app before we recorded podcast. I saw 20 and a half. Travion Henderson over 20 and a half receiving yards. Gunnar Helm anytime TD. I saw it +220. That is a +1060 single game parlay.